closer. Find my script. It was still me, isn't it? Let me try that again.
That's still you. I don't have a...
I know, it's all me.
That's all you.
Hi world, I'm Lori and I was born in 1970.
Hi, I'm Walker and I was born in 2004.
I'm Gen X.
I'm Gen Z.
Welcome to our podcast, My Experience,
Your Experience. Well, so we're from totally two different generations, but we have a whole lot in common considering that we're 30 years apart. We both love movies, TV shows, toys, comic books, and so much more.
Yes, indeed. Over the years, we've had so many amazing conversations about a wide range of topics. We thought it would be fun to share those conversations with the world. We've decided to narrow down our conversation topics to pop culture, which is still pretty broad. But it encompasses so much of what we enjoy and are passionate about, just as we're sure many of you are. Then we thought, what makes our conversations unique? And we realized that our perspectives on these topics are really based off of our generations. I was 6 when Star Wars came out, and Walker was born and Star Wars was everywhere.
Yeah.
When I was born, there were no video games. Walker hasn't known a time when there has not been a video game. How do these experiences affect our views on these topics? How does discovering the joy of something as an adult compare to discovering it as a child? We're hoping some of these topics will connect with our listeners so you will identify yourself in these conversations and think, oh yeah, me too, or oh, that's why Dad has that poster in the living room.
Yeah.
So before we get into our first official podcast conversation, let's share a little bit about ourselves. I'm going to go first. So I'm a Gen Xer, proudly born in 1970. I was 6 years old when Star Wars came out, and it has been my one true geekdom passion ever since. It's really in my life.
Yeah.
Like nonstop,
Yeah.
even during the dark times. My geekiness launched from there into sci-fi, fantasy, G.I. Joe, Transformers, comic books, He-Man. Oh, it just keeps going on. But one of the things you'll notice is that those may be deemed boy topics, at least from people of my generation back in those days. However, I also loved Barbie, My Little Pony, Rainbow Bright, Holly Hobby, Care Bears, the list goes on. I was both an avid comic book reader and a fantasy sci-fi book reader. I don't do it as much anymore because I don't really have the time.
Yeah.
I'm also a big football fan and specifically a Patriots fan. I've been a graphic designer for 30 years plus. And big reveal, I'm Walker's mom.
Woo! Big surprise there.
Your turn.
My turn, and I was born in 2004, and I've never known the world without Star Wars, because Star Wars is just like you said, is also my biggest passion because of how much I adore it and love it. But also I love more than just like watching Star Wars and such. Like I also love Legos and I've also never known the world without Legos either because of
I think Legos were invented before me, but keep going.
Yes, they were they were invented before you, yes. But I mean, I've built Legos all of my life, and like I've collected so much like stuff over the years that I lost track a long time ago. But I mean, I love Legos so much that I actually work at a Lego store. That's how much I love it. But also, there are more franchises than just Star Wars that I absolutely adore, like the Halo franchise, Resident Evil, Fallout, BioShock. There is so much story in those franchises as well. What else did I put down in my notes? I'm also a big comic book fan, just like you said.
Specifically Star Wars comic books.
Yes, mainly Star Wars comic books. I'm also an actor. I've been acting for...
Fourth grade?
Fourth grade, yeah.
You were?
I was 9. I was Blind Hugh in Treasure Island.
Yes, you were.
I was 9, so about over a decade. But I sort of took a break after 4th grade, and then I got back into it 7th grade, and I was Veruca Salt's father in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. And then in 8th grade, I was Jasmine's father, the Sultan in Aladdin.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Father figures. Almost.
Yes, father figures, lots of father figures. And then I immediately signed up in high school because I knew that's what I wanted to do. And I did Romeo and Juliet, and I was one of Tybalt's friends in that play. And then for my very first musical, it was Fiddler on the Roof.
What were you again?
I was a papa.
Another papa.
Yeah.
Another father figure.
And I got to do, and I got to sing To Life, and that was just such a fun experience. And then I did so much more plays like after that during high school. So yeah, it was a lot of fun, and I still to this day, just not as much anymore.
So that's a little bit about us.
Yeah.
Now for our very first official podcast discussion, we just decided that we wanted to discuss why we wanted to start a podcast. So Walker, why don't you go first and share your thoughts about why you want to do this podcast?
Well, I wanted to. I've talked about Star Wars and other franchises all my life, and I feel like I've always been so great at just like talking about those sort of stories, and I just want to express my words to the world.
You want to share it out?
Share it out. But also, you and I both got the inspiration of starting a podcast from a friend of ours, and that just sparked something in me that was just like,
This is something we can do?
This is something we can do, and this is something that we should do because of how much we love sci-fi and fantasy and everything about that. And I was just like...
Do you listen to any podcasts?
I listen to many podcasts, but I feel like I should start to listen to more podcasts.
Most of your podcasts are probably like video. Like, so we're doing this as a video, and we're going to be posting on YouTube.
Yeah.
But we will also post it as an audio podcast on, like, Apple Podcasts. And, Spotify and all those other places.
Yeah. Right? I think the main podcast that I have listened to is the Last of Us podcast.
Oh, the Last of Us podcast was an amazing podcast.
Yeah. I'm excited for season 2 when that comes out.
So, indeed.
Yeah.
So, have any other things to share about why you wanted to do this podcast?
I don't think so. What about you?
I have a long list of reasons why I wanted to do this podcast right here.
She does. Wow.
Let me tell you a little bit about my history of podcasts. Actually, so that's what I wrote down. I wrote down a bunch of different things. And I had said, I looked this up, and podcasts became popular, they said, in 2004. So that actually was the year you were born, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was funny. So podcasts became popular in 2004, though the Google said that they really didn't become popular until like the true crime podcast became a thing. They didn't state when that exactly was. I don't know. I've never been into true crime podcasts. However, I also didn't understand podcasts at all at that point. I was like, why would people want to walk around, jog, exercise, drive, do housework, and listen to somebody just talk about something? Like, I didn't understand that concept. Maybe at that time of my life. So I was 33, well, and then into my early to mid 30s, I was like, I don't get podcasts.
Yeah.
Then in the late 20-teens, so I don't know, like 2015 and 2018, somewhere around there, I was struggling with anxiety.
Yes.
Right. I was having a lot of struggles with anxiety, and what I had realized is that my long commutes home, listening to the afternoon drive radio stations, because I would just listen to the radio in the car, they would actually add to my anxiety. The way that like radio jumps from segment to segment, from commercial to song, and then I'm a notorious.
It's a lot.
It is, but I'm also a notorious channel surfer. Yeah, so like I flip through channels. I cannot stay. I just can't. So it would add to my anxiety. I'm sitting in traffic. There's nothing to really fixate on. The conversations that people are having, the news was depressing. It was bad.
Yeah.
So I don't know, I think I mentioned on Facebook that I was struggling with anxiety, and a friend of mine, our friend Jody,
Which one?
Anderson,
Ah.
Jody Anderson had recommended a podcast about mental health. And she's like, oh, you should listen to this podcast. She's like, I find it really helpful. So I was going home from work one night, and I was like, I should listen to this podcast. I'm like, but how do I listen to a podcast? I didn't even know. I was like, I guess it's on my phone. How do you find it? Figured it out. Pulled it up. I don't even think I'm sure my car was definitely not Bluetooth connected, because like it's only my current car that is Bluetooth. So I don't even think I even had the adapter. So I must have just listening it through my phone, and I listened to that podcast, and I drove home, and I really discovered that it was like, it really helped with my anxiety level just to listen to one conversation for like 50 minutes. Listen to a couple people talking about a specific topic, and I just found it really soothing and helpful and interesting. From there, I put out a message on social media, as I always do.
Yeah.
Because I'm a Gen Xer and I'm on Facebook.
Yeah.
And I said, what do people recommend for podcasts? And people gave all sorts of recommendations. And I found a bunch of podcasts, and I started to build my library. And now, even to this day, in the morning, I like to listen to morning radio. But on the way home, I just don't like afternoon radio.
Yeah.
I listen to a podcast, and I found it really interesting and it's enjoyable.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, I really love podcasts. My favorite podcasts are podcasts where it just sounds like a bunch of friends or a couple of friends getting together and talking about a topic that they're both interested in, or an experience, somebody sharing an experience. Like, I really just like that casualness of a podcast. There's a bunch of them out there. I'm drawn into it. So I like that sort of format.
Yeah.
And then about a year or so ago, as you mentioned, a friend of ours, our friend Barbara Daniel, aka Figgy, had a friend whose husband and son were starting a podcast. It is called Father Son Galaxy.
Yep.
And it is Kerwin and Keith, father and son, talking about. It started out all things Star Wars, but I think it has expanded from there, because they do lots of different things. But they were talking about Star Wars. And when I would listen to it, what I found the most fascinating was that Kerwin is coming from it as an adult, as a dad, as my generation, and talking about his experiences. And then Keith is talking about it as a young kid, and the things that he was interested in, the things that stood out to him. And I really loved that dynamic. Yeah. And so we got to meet Kerwin and Keith this summer
at Boston, at Fan Expo
Boston, which was really cool.
Yeah.
And they were awesome.
Oh yeah.
And we were chatting again with Figgy, and we're like, you know what, Walker and I should start a podcast. And she's like, yes, you need to do that. So yes, that's where it started, right back in the summertime.
Yeah.
Like we started thinking about.
It was just one day you would pick me up from work, and then I think we were at Michael's or something like that. We got in the car, and you started talking about how you were talking to Barbara, and she had friends, Kerwin and Keith, starting a podcast, and then, oh, you know what? It was for their 1,000 subscriber. That's why she posted about it.
Yes, because we were trying to get them to have 1,000 subscribers. Maybe someday we will have 1,000 subscribers.
But yeah, and then you had brought up the podcast, and I was just like, maybe we should start a podcast. Yeah. Didn't you? What was it? Was it you? You told Barbara that we should start a podcast, and she's like, yes. And then when you brought that up to me, I was like, yes. We need to do this because it sounds so much fun. We could talk about the stuff that we love and have fun. So, like, it was a great, concepts like that you and I would start a podcast. Yeah. But one of the other things is I thought that I'm reading my notes because I took some notes. So I thought it would be fun that we could sit down and have a podcast, and we could just sit down and talk about the things that we love and our own shared experiences on those topics. And that you really wanted to do a podcast on Star Wars. Yeah.
Right? Yeah. You like Walker really wanted a podcast on Star Wars. But there's a lot of podcasts out there about Star Wars.
Yes.
So I thought, well, maybe we should expand a little bit. And there were so many things. And at that time, we were watching The Last of Us.
Yeah.
Right? And we were listening to the podcast for Last of Us.
Yep.
And we found that fascinating. And I was like, oh, that would be great to have
I think it was before the idea of us starting a podcast.
Yes, but we had just watched that.
Yeah.
Yes, it was. We had listened to it, but then so we both shared that podcast, and we were able to have conversations. And I thought those kind of I was just fascinated by being able to share my thoughts of it based off of my limited knowledge about The Last of Us, and you sharing it from a much more informed.
I hadn't played the games at that point, but I had watched playthroughs of the games, and I was so familiar with the stories, and that I was familiar with the story and the characters and how they acted and what their personalities were. Yeah. And I was able to contrast the two, and they're very, very similar in most ways, but there are some differences, and those differences are very...
And we will save that as a topic for one of our future podcasts.
Yeah.
But what I was saying is that I felt like it was a way for us it spurred interesting conversation. Yeah. So that's why I thought, let's talk more than just Star Wars. Yeah. Right? There's a lot to talk about in Star Wars. Walker and I have been keeping a running list, and we have, how many? 55 topics, something. Like Last of Us is one of them. But there's so many things, and a lot of them are Star Wars this, Star Wars that, Star Wars this, and we will have those conversations.
Yes, we will.
But yes, I just think that there's so much more in the world that you and I share. But lastly, my main reason for wanting to do this podcast is that I really wanted to capture these conversations between you and I. Yeah. Right? I wanted to capture these conversations with my child. There's a very old cassette kicking around this house somewhere. I don't know where it is. But it is a audio cassette. Do you know what a cassette is?
Yes.
Okay, he knows what a cassette is.
I do know what a cassette is.
There's an audio cassette of a recording of me when I was 3. Talking with my Aunt Jerry, who was probably in her mid to late 20s. Probably late 20s. And we were talking about me becoming a big sister because Nana was about to have Auntie Kelly. Yes. And I used to love listening to this cassette when I had a cassette player. Do you know what a cassette player? Anyway, actually, no, we don't have a cassette player in the house. You can purchase. I'm sure I've seen them out there now. Everything's old. Everything old is new again. Yes, everything's coming back. So, I used to listen to it all the time, and I just loved. It would take me back, and it would capture this little moment of time where I had this conversation with my aunt. What did it mean to be a big sister? Was I excited about being a big sister? Was I worried about being a big sister? And I'm hoping that through this podcast, we can have these conversations, and they are captured in time. Yeah. And in years to come, we could look back fondly on these conversations. Yeah. Maybe you share them with your future children. Yep. And they're just this moment captured in time. And it's kind of like people would do. People do.
Lightning in a bottle.
It's lightning in a bottle, as they say.
Lightning in a jar, or is it a bottle?
I don't know.
One of them.
I'm really bad about cliches. I mix them up. I'm like the guy from Back to the Future who goes, "Act like a tree and get out of here." Buffy. I don't know. Biff. I'm really bad with cliches. Anyway, that really it's a personal reason I want to have this podcast with you. Yep. Is because I want to capture these moments with my child.
Me too.
And have them forever. Yeah. So I wrote down my ultimate reason for this podcast is very personal and selfish because I just want to capture the moment with one of the geeks that I gave birth to.
That's accurate. Very, very accurate.
Very accurate. So that is our reasons for having this podcast. Yeah. We hope that folks will be interested in listening into our conversations.
Yeah, hopefully.
We are going to be this is being posted on YouTube. Yep. We are also going to be posting on all podcast platforms. Yep. We will probably we will have Facebook pages, Facebook page and Instagram page. Yep. and you can connect with us and listen to us there, and maybe share your experiences.
Yeah.
Share your stories.
Mm-hmm.
And that's about it.
Yeah.
We do have a wrap-up little conversation that we will cut to shortly.
Yeah.
But I think that was a good conversation about why we want to have a podcast.
Yeah.
Okay. And we're back. We took a little break in between, but we're back recording. And as we had said, as we wrapped up the first half, we're going to, in our podcast, wrap up every episode with a final conversation. And that final conversation is going to be utilizing a special item. This past summer, we took a family trip to London and we visited Forbidden Planet.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
It keeps confusing me because Walker was in a play called
Return to the Forbidden Planet.
Yes, so I'm like, wait, is that the right one? Forbidden Planet. It's a very well-known geek store in London, and it was only appropriate that our family went there.
Yeah.
It was amazing, and while we were there, we found this, and it's called 125 Conversation Cards, Star Wars for Dinner Parties, Movie Marathons, and More. It's from Chat Pack. And we thought it would be fun to pick a card and answer the question. So we, when Walker and I started this podcast, I suggested we use these cards as a fun way to close out our podcast.
Yep.
So each episode, we're going to take one card, we're going to answer the question, and give our answers. And we'd love to hear what your answers are. So you can, if you're
join in on the fun.
You can join us on the fun.
Yeah.
If they're following us on YouTube, what can they do?
They can comment and contact us via email.
They can contact us via email. Our email is myexperienceyourexperience@gmail.com. And we will also be setting up an Instagram and a Facebook page. Right?
Yep.
Okay, Walker, I'm going to let you pick the first card. So we're going to pick a card, and Walker and I are going to answer the question.
Force.
The Force.
Do you think Anakin Skywalker was the chosen one who brought balance to the Force? Why or why not? Yes.
Oh, deep. That's...
He is...
Okay, I'll let you answer.
He is the chosen one. It was a prophecy from Qui-Gon Jinn, who saw the boy, who he knew that the boy was the chosen one who would bring balance to the Force.
So it wasn't Qui-Gon's prophecy. He just said there was a prophecy.
There was a prophecy. Yeah.
He had said that there was a prophecy.
And after he defeated Palpatine, I think he brought balance to the Force. And yes, he returns in medias, but here's the thing, now that Anakin is one with the Force, he has become essentially the stand-in for the father of the Mortis gods, who keeps the balance between the Force.
Yes, we discovered that these conversation cards are pretty current. However, I don't think that they're that current.
No, they're not
because
that current,
we bought these this summer in London, and Ahsoka hadn't come about yet.
Yeah.
So.
But I think
I was gonna say spoiler alert. Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. Yeah. I guess.
Possibly that's Walker's theory. Is that your answer?
That is my answer.
That's your answer. Okay. And again, do you think Anakin Skywalker was the chosen one who brought balance to the Force? Why or why not? You know, if we were to answer this question at the end of the prequels, knowing what we knew happened in the sequels, the original trilogy, I would say you could say he was the chosen one to bring balance to the Force because of him and everything that circled around him. The Jedi Council and the way the Jedi were at the point of the Phantom Menace and the that era, they were a little too high and mighty. They were a little too involved with the government.
Yes, too involved with politics.
They had become generals, and they weren't supposed to be.
Peacekeepers.
They're supposed to be peacekeepers, but not in that they were military people.
Yeah.
So they had kind of gotten so wound into the politics of the galaxy that they weren't what they were meant to be.
Yeah.
And so because of this whole Anakin's rise, and then he becomes Darth Vader, and then him and the Emperor bring down the Jedi as a whole, like tens of thousands of Jedi.
Yeah.
They basically level set everything.
Yeah, because the light was over the darkness, and they needed to bring that back because the light had become too bold, and they're just like, all right,
you need to bring balance to the Force. Means you have to have equal light and dark.
Yeah,
right. That's true balance.
That's how it works.
Some people would say, well, then, if once the Emperor was defeated, Anakin came back to the light, that just left Luke as the only Jedi. So then, when you say that was unbalanced again, if you read the expanded universe, because at that point that's what we had, then you would know there was still dark in the galaxy, and Luke.
Thrawn.
Thrawn isn't. No, I'm talking about like Force user dark.
Oh, you're talking about
right.
Force
So
users,
there's still dark Force users in the galaxy,
yep.
and Luke was the light. So it balanced out,
yeah.
and then he, taught more people on the Jedi ways, and there were people doing dark Jedi or going in the Sith ways. But if we erase all that, I know, and then jump to the sequels.
Disney sequels.
There's Disney sequels. So The Force Awakens, Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker.
Yep.
We know the Emperor was still alive. Spoiler alert.
But he was also alive in the expanded universe too.
He was. But where does Anakin fall into all that at that point? We saw him in Ahsoka that he's the one who has basically become the stand-in of the father, and technically Anakin is But there's no balance at that point because Kylo went dark and the Emperor, and then there's Rey, but Rey's not. I don't know. It gets so complicated. I think once you got past Return of the Jedi, it gets complicated.
So what do you think? Do you think Anakin
was the chosen one?
Balance to the Force and was the chosen one?
For the moment, he brought balance to the Force for a moment in time.
Yeah.
And then, as things always happen.
Darkness always returns.
Well, no, it's not always darkness. It's things lean one way or the other.
True.
It's hard to keep balance consistent.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's just the nature of life.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So those are our answers.
Yeah.
As we said, we would love to know what your answer is.
Yeah.
Do you think Anakin was the chosen one, and to bring balance to the Force? And if so, why or why not? And leave your comments below this video, or email us if you want to, or look for us on Instagram and Facebook. If it's not live when this video goes live, it will soon be.
Yes, absolutely.
Right.
Yep.
So that's about it. We hope you enjoyed our first official podcast. We enjoyed doing it.
Yeah.
And there'll be many more.
Yeah. So thanks for watching. Make sure you like, comment, favorite, and subscribe. And take care. Have a good day, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.